Please welcome back to the show one of the local homeboys and friend of the show, author and researcher, Chad Stuemke. How's it going today, man?
Hey, going good, Shane. Thanks for having me back. It's been a minute. Looking forward to being back and having another fun conversation, man.
Always a good time, man. I'm hoping that
Yeah.
one day we'll actually get to go back out and actually be able to explore a little bit because we got a chance to do that before our previous episode. But as people may have caught from the last episode, we just touched a little bit of base on Detroit. So I figured, we'd come back around, of course, and be able to touch a little bit more of that and probably expand out a little bit. I know that at one point you'd mentioned touching even just different cities with all the weirdness going on behind the background of all these different cities and stuff in Michigan. But I guess before we get into today's topic, if anybody didn't listen to that last episode or they aren't familiar with who you are exactly, why don't you fill them in exactly on what you do and how exactly you got into your work, man?
Oh, geez, long story. I'm, like you said, an author and a researcher. I've been looking into kind of the strange and paranormal, in particular in the Midwest and Michigan for, oh man, a good 15, 20 years now. And really have dug into a lot of the symbolism in some of the cities here in Michigan and around the Midwest. And I just like to, go out and explore what's in my backyard, so to speak, and bring that, information to the public. And, I've been focused a lot on Detroit for a long time, and now I've kind of moved some of my interest to northern Michigan. So I was thinking today maybe, we could wrap up a little bit of Detroit. You had brought something to my attention that's super interesting. I think we should wrap up with Detroit. And
something I drive past almost every single day, weirdly enough.
Yep.
Had to send it your way.
Perfect synchronicity, because I used to have that in my presentation. For whatever reason, it just kind of fell out over the years, but perfect to bring that back up. So we'll get into that and wrap up Detroit. And thought we'd talk a little bit about some paranormal hotspots or window areas in northern Michigan today.
Well, perfect. I guess, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but just something to possibly think about, and maybe we can get to this a little bit more on the back end. Considering that we're both wearing Michigan Dogman hats, I kind of wanted to talk about, this will kind of mix in a little bit with your research and a little bit with this whole idea about all these different teams that are just now starting to do this whole like cryptid thing just for summer. With your research, you often talk about this whole thing about people not necessarily like thinking about directly doing something, but something kind of like coming into fruition and like happening. And then once it is created, then all of a sudden there's all this group thought on it. And it almost kind of like gives it more power, gives it more validity within this reality. And I'm kind of curious if maybe this might be some of this undertone that's kind of falling in with, weirdly enough, at least the Midwest, doing all these cryptid baseball teams with all of this I guess, altered reality type thought that's in the news and everywhere. They're kind of like opening the doorway a little bit. And it almost kind of seems like they're intentionally putting group thought on these folklore creatures from these particular areas. And, it could just definitely be something that, is just something fun for the area, but it's super bizarre that it's all happening at once. And I feel like it might possibly be one of those instances of not directly wanting to do it, but like a groupthink thing happening without people willingly knowing that it's happening.
Yeah, man, 100%, 100%. Especially if you think about it, like in the aspect of the stadium, you got thousands of people, most likely wearing that same hat or that same jersey with, we'll say, the Dogman or the Mothman on it. And they call it like Dogman Night. That's putting some energy out there, no question about it. And whether it was intentional or unconscious, subconscious, could go either way. But regardless, when you got a stadium full of people wearing Dogman outfits, and barking at the game, it's putting some certain energy out at that particular location, no doubt about it. Then you incorporate a bunch of different teams at different locations, yeah. Like you said, it could just be the right time that these are coming into fruition.
Definitely fascinating to think about, especially with like all the Michigan stuff. But I guess we could probably get a little bit more into it on the back end. But I guess we can hop into the presentation and we'll dig that back up in a little bit then, man.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Let me pull it up real quick here. All right. Let me know when you see it.
Just popped up.
All right, perfect. So, yeah, we're going to start off still in Detroit. And you had texted me a week or so ago asking about if I had any idea about the obelisks you were seeing on your way to work. And super good point out, man. These are kind of takes us exactly where we left off from our last episode where we were talking about Hart Plaza and Stargate Detroit. And in particular, we were talking about the Stargate Monument at Hart Plaza. Well, those were created by David Barr, the artist, and he did a lot of other amazing artwork besides the Stargate. And we also talked about some Egyptian symbolism. Well, not only did David Barr create the Stargate downtown Detroit, but he also, one of his other projects was called the Baseline Project or the Coastline Project. And what he did or began to do was creating these large, some of them 8-foot tall, some of them 12-foot tall granite obelisks. And he was going to place a granite obelisk in every county across the entire state of Michigan, across what they call the baseline. The baseline, when you're going through Detroit, the baseline would be 8 Mile Road. And then as you crosses the entire state of Michigan. And this is where, when they were doing layouts of the state of Michigan, all the measurements began off of this baseline. So David Barr, his idea was he was going to put these granite obelisks across the entire state. So when you're driving to work, what city are you, just out of curiosity, are you seeing your granite obelisk in?
I'm seeing it in Detroit area. I don't know exactly what city it is, but when I'm heading over from Roseville into Livonia area, it's somewhere in that middle right there. So what is that exactly? It might be like Oak Park, maybe, possibly.
Okay, that sounds about right. He made it about halfway through the state from Detroit. He passed away a couple years ago, so as far as I know, the project wasn't totally completed. I don't know if they have plans to complete the project or not, but symbolically, we were talking about Stargate Detroit, and now you brought up a great fact that there's also, leading away from Stargate Detroit across the entire state, was going to be this energetic line of granite obelisks. And just briefly, I'm going to show you this park where this line of obelisks would have ran across the entire state. It's across what we said, the baseline. Now, the baseline goes horizontal across the bottom of the state of Michigan. There's also a meridian line that goes north and south. And where they connect is what they call Michigan's point of origin. And every county, city was measured from this beginning point of origin at the Meridian Park. So I just bring this point of origin up because, if you're not seeing pictures, it's not that impressive, but it kind of looks like a portal just out in the middle of the woods. And you have all these obelisks that were leading to and from this Meridian Park and this point of origin. It's very symbolic, all created by the guy who also helped to create Stargate Detroit. So,
say these things are absolutely fascinating, man. I'm surprised that they never ended up actually like finishing the project. Like, I'm kind of curious if it's going to be one of those things. Like, we're bringing up the whole aspect of like group thought on things. I'm curious if somebody will end up picking up the torch eventually one day and continuing the project, and they'll kind of hide it under the facade of like, oh, I'm picking up somebody else's work and finishing it, when realistically it's something that was going to come into fruition regardless. And it's just a matter of like, one person got stopped doing it, but it's still something that's going to happen and is bound to happen.
Yeah, man, I'm on board with that all the way. And that's why I said I don't know if he finished it, but there could possibly be plans to finish it, because it is one of those projects that I could totally see another artist, picking up the pieces and continuing it in the honor of David Barr. Because like a lot of artists, once he passed away, his work became super popular. So I could see somebody continuing this project. But symbolically speaking, great catch. These granite obelisks. We were talking about Egyptian symbolism just kind of flowing out of Detroit, and this is a perfect example of it.
And it's so subtle too, because when you're driving down the street, it's like there's a bunch of little shopping plazas, and then you just drive. They have like a little grass fielded area, and just the front corner of it is this little spot with little benches, and then there's just this obelisk in the center. So it's like, if you're not looking for it, you drive right past it. And it seems like that's how a lot of this stuff is in Detroit, is especially like even when we went down and started walking, we talked about the original like stone that everything was planned on from Detroit. Like, it's hidden in the middle of where everybody's sitting and eating, and it's like,
Hmm.
Detroit and all of the surrounding area, it's like everything that's occult is so subtle that most people that live here don't believe it. But as soon as you start seeing it, it's so prevalent everywhere that it's like you can't not see it everywhere. It's just you have to look for it. And when you see it, it's literally just little spots of everywhere. Like correct
Yeah.
me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if you've actually found this, but there's almost this like little statue in the Detroit area that almost looks like a little person. Like it could almost supposed to be like representing like a homunculi or something possibly too. But it's super duper subtle. It's in the middle of like a shopping area where there's like little fountains and stuff around it, and it's like if you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't even realize it was there.
Right. Now, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but yeah, that's exactly it. And just like these, like if you don't take the time, like if you didn't get home and take the time to go online, find out who created that small little obscure obelisk you just passed in the car, you would never know what a large and enormous project this actually was. I mean, hardly anybody knows about this project. Even if you were to pass maybe two of these, you still would not realize that the point of the project was to create a line of these obelisks across the state and energetically, create a line across the state. So it really takes someone to, like you, notice it and ask questions about it to have a clue about it.
Dude, I even went to the Masonic Temple recently for going for like a wrestling event, and just
Yeah.
going into that place, man, and feeling like all of the like energy that's in that place. Like even like it seemed like obviously the building's super duper old, so it has no air conditioning for that aspect. But I was even just thinking about how hot it gets in there, and the fact that everybody is kind of like sitting within their own heat. And it almost kind of seems like it's almost semi-ritualistic, considering that you're having like this giant group event where everybody's screaming, everybody's getting into it. Because particularly it was wrestling that I went to. I know most people go to concerts and stuff, but being in that room where it's like built up the heat, it starts building up like I don't know how to explain it. Like everybody's almost kind of getting into like their primal emotions almost because of the
Yeah.
heat. Like it almost just kind of seems like it's almost part of the effect where it's like, again, so subtle. Everybody goes to all these concerts at the Masonic Temple and it's just the Masonic Temple. Everybody just passively throws that around. But you go there and you start really looking at the building and everything and you realize like how weird that place like really is.
Oh, 100%. And there's something different about group energy like that and group consciousness like that. In particular, when you're in a building like that. To me, I feel like that building over the years and over time collects that energy. And depending on what kind of concert you're at, or wrestling event, which is awesome, by the way, but that building, made out of limestone and marble and granite, I believe is collecting that energy over the years.
So, also too, kind of going into the Masonic Temple, at least for just a second.
Yeah.
I wanted to take a second to talk about like the outside of the building. I noticed again, it has a lot of like really, really interesting like architecture around the outside. And before we continue on with this, just because we brought it up, I
Yeah.
just was curious about your kind of breakdown on what you've picked up, at least from the outside of the Masonic Temple, particularly like leading up to the doorway.
Well, way above the doorway are two amazing Knights Templar sculptures. I believe they're the tallest sculptures of Templars in Detroit. And all the sculptures were done by a guy. His name is George D. Mason. His last name actually happens to be Mason.
Of course.
But yeah, it's awesome. And right above the doorway, there's a sculpture of King Solomon. It's all the classic Masonic, characters. A couple of gargoyles right above them, watching over. And it's the largest. It's hard to get a idea looking at pictures, but it's the largest Masonic temple in the world. It's absolutely huge. It takes up almost a whole city block. It's a gigantic building with some of the most incredible architecture you've ever seen.
So, I guess kind of going a little bit into northern Michigan then, because I don't want to spend too
Yeah.
much time on Detroit, of course, just because I know you got a lot more as far as like northern Michigan and stuff goes. Where did your like research kind of extend out? Because I know that particularly like you're from northern Michigan, but I'm assuming that like your base of your research really started in Detroit, and then you kind of spread north from there.
Yeah, exactly. Say there's several unusual cases that we can kind of compare to the Bermuda Triangle, that they call the Great Lakes Triangle or the Lake Michigan Triangle. And don't get me wrong, the triangle part of these are overplayed. But living up here, I continue to see different cases of, say, planes disappearing with the pilots, just vanishing. The same area you'll have a hotspot of UFO sightings, and in particular up here, underwater stone circles. So what I've been trying to do is kind of connect some of these underwater stone circles and some of these other underwater anomalies to some of these window areas to see if there's any type of connection. And that's kind of led me around northern Michigan, ironically. We're going to start just briefly in Traverse City, which happens to be super close to where I live. It's 20 minutes away. And then we'll go up to a look at a case in Lake Superior that has a lot of the same similarities to the first case we're going to look at. And then all that will end up in Mackinac, that Mackinac Island, one of the most sacred places, unusual places in Michigan, as far as I'm concerned. So, Traverse City. You ever been to Traverse City, Shane?
I have not personally, but I have always wanted to go there, particularly because of I know there's a lot of like really cool abandoned places. There's the what's the name of that hospital? That
Yeah, the insane asylum.
yeah, the Traverse City Insane Asylum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see that place. That place seems like it'd be really cool, but yeah, never actually been there myself yet.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to get you up here then, man, because Traverse City is awesome. For up northern Michigan, it's the largest city up here, and every year they have their main festival is called the Cherry Festival, and everybody from downstate comes up over the 4th of July for the Cherry Festival. So there'll be just thousands and thousands of people, this one little area on the bay of Traverse City at the Cherry Festival. And every year they have an air show. Either the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds will headline the show. So the case we're going to talk about right now took place in 1998. So not that long ago. A lot of time you talk about these cases and they're, way in the distant past. This is 1998 at the Traverse City Air Show. So the day before the air show, this pilot, you can see if you're looking, his name is Don Scaler, and he's going to take a test flight in this Czechoslovakian MiG that he brought in from Ohio. And this is a super rare plane. He actually takes with him the flight school instructor from Northwestern Michigan College for a joyride. And long story short, they vector out from Cherry Capital Airport here in Traverse City. They're on the radar, and they're taking a little test flight directly north out over Grand Traverse Bay, out towards Beaver Island. And it's the middle of the day, and they're a blip on the radar, and suddenly that blip disappears. So instantaneously, they send out the Coast Guard. Traverse City is a Coast Guard community, so we already had Coast Guard in the air for the air show. So the second that blip went off radar, they sent the Coast Guard in to look for him. Well, the Coast Guard couldn't find anything. No debris, no oil slick, nothing. So pretty soon, they send in the Blue Angels. They send in the biggest cargo plane they have. It's called Fat Albert. So they got Fat Albert circling around the area. They got the Blue Angels zipping around. Coast Guard's still out there. They're not finding anything yet, so they call in the state cops. Now the state cops are out there. Because of the big scene, it's on the news. Well, so now, like I said, there's thousands of people in town out on the bay in their boats. So when they realize what happened, they're out there searching too. Long story short, Shane, to this day have never found one scrap of debris. There was never an oil slick. They'll dredge the lake every so many years. But Don Scaler, the flight instructor, and his Czechoslovakian MiG literally just vanished that day. And this image I have up here, this is Don Scaler's wife. That happened to be their anniversary. And this was an interview on the local news up here. And this was his wife talking. And the state cops actually had the nerve to say to his wife in this interview, you can find this online, that, well, maybe the Great Lakes Triangle got your husband. She was perplexed by that, obviously. But it's right in the interview. So, they to this day have never found anything. So a couple small things I like to point out about this case. This took place exactly on the 45th parallel, and if that has to do with anything, I have no clue, just a little side synchronicity. And it also took place between two ancient stone circles. Have you ever heard of the Lake Michigan Stonehenge?
Yes, I was actually about to ask about this one, but I didn't want to jump too far ahead because I felt like this probably played a piece in it because this is one of those mysterious things that I know that not anybody has really gotten in to be able to do any real research on the thing, right?
That's right. There's say the initial archaeologists to discover it. They've been down there, and there's been a few other people that have been given the location. But in general, because it's considered a sacred site, they're keeping the location secret. Now, that being said, one thing we gotta go over just real quick about the Lake Michigan Stonehenge is that it's not the pictures that you see online a lot of times that have these tall standing stones and these scuba divers going around them. Those are fake images. They've been online for a long time. The real deal is it's just a ancient stone circle, which is just as incredible, just as important. And on one of the stones, along the outside of the stone circle, there is a mastodon carving. So according to the archaeologists, and this is, not just some say so, this is the archaeologist's opinion that this stone, this monument, this underwater Stonehenge has to be at least 10,000 years old. That's the last time this would have been above water. Now, what nobody ever points out about this ancient Stonehenge is that leading away from the Stonehenge, there is a mile-long row of rocks. And that mile-long row of rocks is directed to a northerly direction, and it points directly towards Beaver Island, where there happens to be another ancient stone circle on the island. So, what I like to point out is somewhere between the stone circle on Beaver Island and the stone circle in Grand Traverse Bay, this was the exact search radius. And somewhere in between this area, this plane vanished in the middle of the day, in the middle of the Cherry Festival.
Just wanted to point out, are you familiar with South Fox Island?
Yes, I am, and it's right in the middle. Absolutely.
Or is that part of what you're going to get into here? Because if not, I mean, you might want to take a second to bring that up.
I was not going to get into the South Fox Island, but South Fox Island has a whole, legends of its own. It's basically we'll just call it the Epstein Island of northern Michigan. And yeah.
A bunch of the guys from the auto industry were connected into that one, and they basically pretended like it was a boys' camp, so people would willingly send their kids there, not realizing what was actually happening there. And that went on from like the 70s until like the mid 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, at least maybe it might have even started before that. That's when they got kind of documentation, but yeah, it was known for that, unfortunately.
Which also, I mean, if you're considering all the weirdness coming into the area, people are looking at it from the surface like a bunch of weirdos just trying to get off. But I mean, could there be a lot more into it as far as like ritualistic, sex magic, things like that? I mean, definitely possible considering the search radius.
Definitely possible. Like if you happen to see this online right now and you see the search radius, South Fox Island's pretty much in the middle of it, So what I'm getting at, though, we'll shorten it up, is I am not saying that I think the stone circles caused this plane to disappear. What I am saying is I think there may be something special or unusual about this area, and in ancient times, ancient cultures marked this area with stone circles. And another just synchronicity, we'll call it, well, I don't think it's a synchronicity, but the largest magnetic anomaly in Michigan is created by the Mid-Continental Rift System. And here's an image of the Mid-Continental Rift and the largest magnetic anomaly. And you can see it literally leads directly where that star is. That's the location we're talking about. So the largest magnetic anomaly literally leads directly into this Grand Traverse Bay Stone Circle as well as the Beaver Island Stone Circle. So that's another thing they could have been marking.
Also, something weird to think about, because this is something that seems to correlate with a lot of my other research. And I know that you said you were going to dive in a little bit into the paranormal stuff for Northern Michigan here, but just out of curiosity, going up that specific path, have you found any instances, particularly of UFO sightings glitches in reality, I guess is probably another good way of saying it, or even like time dilation, or just like different like weird instances with like time bending possibly, because I've kind of noticed this weird correlation with magnetism and these particular instances, even connecting in with some of the like missing 411 cases. But looking at almost where that map goes, it might be a little bit more north from where I'm thinking, but does that not kind of pass through like where the Manistee is, where there is some missing 411 type cases?
It does. It passes the far western edge of this anomaly would run along the edge of the Manistee, so to speak. But as far as having strange happenings within this anomaly, absolutely. Not only the Grand Traverse Bay, but it reaches up through Petoskey, which happens to be where I had some of my experiences that got me into this in the first place, up through Mackinac, which is, when we're talking about time anomalies, anyone that gets off the boat at Mackinac, you could ask them, and the first thing they say is they felt like they took a step back in time, even if they're being sarcastic, just because it's the horses and whatnot. Everybody has that feeling of something different about the time right there. So yeah, that's a great point out. And so what I would like to point out is we just looked at Traverse City, which is right in the heart of that anomaly. If you follow that anomaly north, where it makes
which also has a lot of paranormal and haunted stuff in that area. So again, probably another correlation in there.
That's exactly it. So when I talk about any of these places we're going to talk about, it's not just one phenomena. Traverse City, absolutely, like you mentioned, we got the very haunted asylums. We have what they call the portal tree. We have lots of UFO sightings and USO sightings, and then we have cases of planes and pilots vanishing midday during the busiest day of the year.
I'm glad you called it the portal tree, because at least for me, when it comes to the paranormal, and I don't know, maybe you have different beliefs on it, but I know everybody believes one thing about the paranormal, but I think it's something completely different that's more so connected in with this interdimensional stuff and science and like almost like rifts in time or being outside of time itself. And I don't think it's exactly like your dead grandma haunting you or dead relatives haunting you, but rather like a ripple or like a rift that like lets out into like a different period in time almost. Like it's something that goes into like higher dimensional understanding and not so much paranormal understanding. And I think that's why a lot of the paranormal has been covered up intentionally through almost like comedy impressions of people pretending like they're paranormal enthusiasts. And that's why you get all the like, whoa, like all the creepy ghost shows and all that kind of shit, is because they're intentionally letting people believe that that is what the paranormal is when they know it's something completely different than that.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Like I think it's like you said, a ripple in time. I think maybe the veil is thinner, so to speak. And I think the geology has something to do with it in a lot of the cases. I really do. So that being said, if we follow this magnetic anomaly, this geology north, it'll take us to the next spot. And I'm going to kind of cruise through this one so we can get to Mackinac.
I have one last thing to quickly interrupt with, and I apologize.
Please. No, don't.
So coming in from like the UP and like the northern area where all this magnetic anomaly comes down, at one point in time, was there volcanoes or volcanic activity that caused this magnetic anomaly? Because that's another weird correlation that I've noticed in a lot of these areas of research, is that particularly the magnetic anomaly is caused by a volcano that was there at some point.
Simple answer is yes, absolutely. That's pretty much exactly what we're looking at.
I think that those caverns that are circular play a key in whatever this anomaly is. Like, I think that these things are used for whatever this crossing the veil or getting through portals is. There's these magnetic tubes that are created because of volcanic activity way long ago in the past.
Yep, absolutely. And when we're talking about volcanic activity long in the past, up here where this red star is up in northern Lake Superior, this is the Isle Royal area, and where all the ancient copper deposits are. Those copper deposits are due to the ancient volcanic activity. This is one of the most ancient volcanic areas in this region of the globe at one point.
Isn't that crazy to think about? Like, being a Michigander your entire life, you never think about the fact that Michigan had volcanic activity and the fact that it was a freshwater ocean for a very long time, like a tropical ocean. Like, being a Michigander, that's like crazy to think about.
Oh, totally. Yeah, finding like Petoskey stones and different freshwater corals. Yeah, 100%. So we'll go up to Lake Superior, the biggest freshwater lake in the world, just real briefly, because it's the same exact scenario as Traverse City. We'll get back in the 1950s. This is called the Kinross incident. The U.S. Navy sent out a Scorpion F-189 jet out after what they described as a UFO. The UFO went over Sault Ste. Marie, which was U.S. Canadian, very militarized space. So they sent out an F-189 literally chasing it. And on radar, once again, they had the plane on radar, the blip closing in on the so-called UFO. And as it closed in, eventually the two blips merged. I'm just showing this comic real quick because it's a good depiction of what actually happened. And the two blips merged into one, and both of them vanished. And momentarily, one of the blips came back under the radar, which was the UFO, not Felix Monclauss and the F-189 Scorpion jet. And the UFO took off to a northwestern direction, and the jet was never to be found. They instantly, like in Traverse City, this is the Navy now. They had helicopters out there. They had another fighter jet out there. They had the Coast Guard out there. And once again, they never found no debris, no oil slick. They never found any remnants of Felix Monclauss or his jet. And the only little clue they had is one of the fighter jets that they sent out after looking for him after Felix Monclauss disappeared. Supposedly one of the fighter jets heard a garbled message, and he thought it was Felix. And that was it. Now, his family, everybody believed he literally died chasing a UFO. Even on his gravestone, you can see here, I have it pictured. His family put in loving memory of Gene. He disappeared November 23rd, intercepting a UFO over Canadian border, the pilot of the F-89 jet plane. So everybody believed that Felix disappeared chasing this UFO. Same scenario. Well, this is a little crazier because in this case, he's actually chasing a UFO. But same scenario, plane and pilot vanish, instantaneous search, nothing to be found. Now this is
just to throw this in here too.
Yeah.
Like I had recently just went to all the way to Manistee, Pictured Rocks, that whole area up in the UP for a wedding. And actually went into Lake Superior for a little bit, and everybody hears about how cold Lake Superior is, but I don't think they actually realize how ice cold this is.
Yeah.
So the lake is so deep that it stays almost freezing cold, even during hot times during the summer. We had just had that 85, 90 something, super duper hot heat wave. And the water was still probably a good, I wouldn't say it was any more than 50 degrees when you put your feet into the water. So considering how deep this lake is, actually trying to put that into your mind that even at the surface of the water, where there's rock probably only a couple inches down, it's still probably in 50 something degrees. It just kind of makes you wonder, what could possibly be at the bottom of this. You always kind of hear about these underwater alien bases, all that kind of stuff, and of course the anomaly happens over in Lake Michigan, but assumably if you had a hub or a place that you were starting at, you weren't going to draw a lot of attention there. And what not a perfect place than something weird to be happening under Lake Superior, since nothing even floats up anyways because the lake's so cold and it's so deep.
It's cold and it's deep, and because it's cold and deep, it preserves everything. It preserves shipwrecks in pristine condition. We got 200-300-year-old shipwrecks that look like they just sank a week ago. But good point out, man, with the what's under there, because that leads me exactly to what I want. The whole reason I brought up the airplane and the pilot vanishing in this area was just like Traverse City. There's an anomaly in the same area they disappeared, but this anomaly is next level, way crazier than the Lake Michigan Stonehenge. I call this the Lake Superior underwater anomaly, and I personally discovered this 10 years ago or so, and I took 5 years going up here and talking to all the ship captains, talking to the scuba divers, the sailors, to see if anybody had an idea what this was. Nobody had a clue what I was talking about. Long story short, this is just off the northern shore of Isle Royale, and this is the exact area, super volcanic. This is where the copper's gone missing, but more importantly, this is where the planes have gone missing, ships, And we just happen to have this underwater anomaly. It sits in about 500 feet of water, super deep. Nobody has been down. Well, nobody we know of has been down there.
Or return to tell the tale. Dun dun dun.
Or, yep. Well, so the shape of it, if you're not looking, is kind of oblong, but it's huge. It's 3 miles wide by 2 miles. It's got a 1/4 mile wide of an opening. It's the width of the walls are uniform the entire way across of it. You can go down on Google Earth and do measurements. The floor across the entire anomaly is level. So it's way too uniform, it seems like, to be natural. So a couple of possibilities. I'm just going to zip through this because my whole point is just to show there's a weird anomaly at the same place, all this window area once again. But a couple possibilities people have mentioned. Could it be a meteorite impact? Possibly, but to me, it looks way too uniform. Could it be, like we talked about, an ancient caldera, the top of an ancient caldera? Because this was a volcanic area, but once again, way too uniform. And at one point, this area, when the ice sheets retreated, they actually gouged the surface of Isle Royale. So anything this uniform shouldn't be there. Could it be an ancient mega mound site? Maybe, but it's about the triple to quadruple the size of any mounds we know of now. So, possible, but I don't know for kind of doubt it. Getting a little more out there, but could it be an ancient Atlantean copper mining port? Plato talked about the Atlanteans using orichalcum, which was derived from copper, which the purest form of copper all came from this exact Isle Royale right here. These are how big these are pieces of float copper that came from this area. So could it be that the Atlanteans had, a copper mining operation going here, or the Phoenicians even, and at some point the waters rose? Now, even crazier, could it be an underwater government lab, underwater government base? And the reason I use this possibility is a direct experience I was told by a friend, Wayne May, the editor of Ancient American Magazine. He published this article for me, and he said, I got a friend who had an experience in this exact location. He was out there fishing, and a periscope supposedly popped up out of the water and turned into the direction of his fishing boat, and terrified him to the point of he just got the message he wasn't supposed to be there, and to this day he will not go fishing in that area. So could it be an underwater government base in northern Lake Superior? Sounds crazy, but maybe. And we're talking about UFOs, though, even crazier. Could it be an underwater UFO base, or underwater USO base and an underwater government base, or a combination of the two? I don't, I can't say, but what I can say is there's this crazy 3 foot by 2 or 3 miles by 2 miles uniform anomaly in the exact same area that we're having what I like to call window area. We're having disappearances of planes, people. We have UFOs, ghost ships vanishing. You name it, it happens in this area above this anomaly.
But not a perfect place to do it other than Lake Superior because, like I mentioned again, the water is so cold that it's one of the few places you'll go to the beach and there's maybe like 2 people in the water. And those people are in the water maybe up to their waist, and that's about it. So, realistically, what not a perfect place that even during the summer, people really are going that deep into it where they accidentally stumble upon it. Because, even some of the other lakes, people are just doing amateur scuba diving, stuff like that. But it's why are you going to go amateur scuba diving here when you can do it in one of the more comfortable lakes to do it at? It seems like it's minimal people in the area. So if you're going to put a base anywhere in the Great Lakes, Lake Superior would definitely be the place. Yeah. If you were going to put an underwater base anywhere on U.S. soil, if you were the U.S. government, for example, again, what not a better place than the Great Lakes, particularly Lake Superior? That would be the ideal location in my book.
Oh, 100%. And let's see if I can just show you something real. In this image in the top left here, you can see that yellow line. That is the U.S.-Canadian border. So you can't have you cannot get any closer to Canada than that. So it's a very, coincidental, a very strategic location for sure.
Yeah, that's even more bizarre with exactly what I was saying, that it's like right on that
It's
border.
on
Like
it.
they literally couldn't put it any closer. Like
Couldn't-
even if they were just trying to do an experiment of like how potentially close could we put something to another place's border, the way to do it would be you'd have to do it underwater, and they're just testing some stuff out. Like, I mean, even if it's just like a remnants of like an attempt at trying to do an underwater base from the 70s, like it's still just as fascinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, that's another hot spot. And one of the correlation I like to make is we have these anomalies, this anomalous architecture, anomalous underwater anomalies that just happen to correspond with these window areas, I like to call them. And that's going to be the same scenario with the last place we'll just briefly talk about. I call it Mystic Mackinac. And here in Michigan, as you know, Shane, all roads lead to Mackinac. If you're in the Upper Peninsula coming south, you're going to end up at the Mackinac Bridge. If you're in the Lower Mitten going north, you're going to end up at the Mackinac Bridge. And right off the tip of Mitten there is Mackinac Island. And here in Michigan, to the local Native Americans, Mackinac Island was their most sacred location by far. They considered this their Eden. They considered this their point and place of origin. They literally considered this a gateway between worlds, between this life and the afterlife, and other realms in particular. And if you go to Mackinac, you can go around the island, and they have signs. The signs telling you this exact story I'm about to tell you. I'm not even exaggerating. They believed this was their point of origin, that this is where their god Gitche Manitou, when he came to Earth, Mackinac Island was where Gitche Manitou was said to reside. And we talked about time and space a little bit. And like I said, they believe this is a middle point, the center point, but not only north, south, east, and west, but also above and below. They felt this was the central point of the upper worlds and the lower worlds. And wouldn't you know it, just recently, they just discovered another ancient stone circle right here in the Straits of Mackinac. So this is one of our connections. Here's our underwater anomaly, or in particular, another stone circle. That we have the stone circle in Grand Traverse Bay, the one on Beaver Island we talked about, and then directly east of that puts us here on the sacred Mackinac Island. So we're starting to see, some similarities between these places. So the Straits of Mackinac, I'm just going to go over some of the phenomenon that take place here on a kind of relatively normal basis. There's all kinds of geologic anomalies. We have UAP and USOs and orb sightings quite frequently. We have legends and sightings of both cryptids, dogman, and water monsters, basically lake creatures. Hauntings. Mackinac Island is by far considered the most haunted location in the state. And I got a personal story. I'm not a big haunted guy, but I had an experience on Mackinac Island. Ghost ships, giants and fairies, all the legends that have to do with the different geological features today we'll talk about are associated with either giants, fairies, or otherworldly entities. And then, of course, time anomalies, like we talked about. So that's just a few of the strange things that happen at Mackinac. So I'm going to just take you on a really quick journey over there. So don't mind if I breeze through, but I'm going to show you some of the symbolism on the way to the island. Have you ever been to the island, Shane?
I have not actually been on the island, but I'm actually planning on going to the island this September. I'm going to be heading up towards like Gaylor to meet up with some family and stuff. And we usually end up going out towards like Mackinac, but we've always wanted to make a day out of going to Mackinac City and haven't actually planned it like ahead of time. Or Mackinac Island. So we're planning on actually going there. So I've been around Mackinac Island more times than I can count, but I've never actually been on the island. But I've been
Perfect.
mainly in St. Ignace, so right across from the island, where all the ferries and everything are.
Awesome. Well, it's kind of like Detroit then. A lot of the people, a lot of the symbolism I'm going to tell you today, they wouldn't recognize. But since we talk about it, you'll probably recognize a lot of it. So that's awesome. Dude, your first trip to Mackinac, you're loving life, dude. It's so awesome. All right. I'm sorry. I got excited for you.
Dude, I'm super excited. Like I said, it's like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to afford all the ghost stuff and all that shit, but it's like I just want to be able to see it in general because it's like, you know, living here, I've heard a million different stories about it, seen a million different pictures of it, seen it over the water from a distance, but never actually been there.
September would be a good time too because a lot of the tourists have gone home, so that'll be a great time to go. All right. So most likely, if you take off from Mackinac City when you go into the island, you'll probably take Shepler's Ferry. It's one of the two ferries. And of course, the first thing it tells you when you arrive is that this is the gateway to Mackinac Island. And you know we keep seeing this everywhere we go, Shane, but just wanted to point that out. The first thing you'll see is it lets you know this is the gateway. And once you're at the gateway to Mackinac Island, this is the gateway to the ferry. And ferries also can have very symbolic meanings. Ferry boats symbolize a journey between different states, different beings, different realms. And we don't got to get into it, but the ferry ride itself, can be very symbolic. Now, your ferry ride here, Shane, is going to take you by, of course, the Mackinac Bridge, one of the largest suspension bridges in the world. And, of course, the bridge, too, can be very symbolic. It's a gateway between the upper and lower peninsulas. It's the gateway between water and sky, past and present, known and unknown, and in particular, a gateway between worlds. And then you will arrive on the sacred Mackinac Island. And like I said, the first thing when you get off that boat, Shane, and you get on the dock and you walk through the portal into downtown, you feel like you took a step back into time. And there's no way to explain that feeling until you get there. But I guarantee you, if you ask 100 people the same question, how did you feel when you got to Mackinac Island? I bet 99 out of maybe 100 would say the same thing. They felt like they took a step back in time. And of course, a lot of this has to do with, if you're not from Michigan, you might not know this, but Mackinac Island has banned automobiles back in the 1880s. So today, the only form of transportation on the island is bicycle and horses and carriages. So you will literally hear the click clack of the horses as they go by, the bicycles going by, and quite a few smells too. But it all adds to the ambiance of you literally feel like you took a step back in time. Now, back to the sacredness of the island, just briefly. This whole island is actually an ancient burial ground. Because the Native Americans believed it to be the center of their world, the place between this life and the afterlife, they would bury their most sacred chiefs here. And eventually, everybody else wanted to be buried near their chiefs. So, long story short, this area you see in front of you here, it's called the farm. Today it's a park. Is this entire area, there's thousands of ancient burials under this landscape here. Same around the island, just the thousands. The saying goes, if you can find a place to dig that isn't rocky, you'll hit bones. And every time they do renovations downtown in the heart of the city, they'll have to stop almost every time because they will come across Native American bones.
Just out of curiosity, if they made it like, I mean, maybe if you're not like a resident, it's your own property, but is it like illegal to like dig on Mackinac Island without like permission?
Absolutely. No digging.
Yeah, I figured.
No metal detectors. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And if you were able to dig, this was there was different battles here. This was an ancient British fort. One time there was the French were here, that you would find all kinds of medallions and different relics from the periods. And that's a lot of
right across the water, you got Fort Michilimackinac, and the cool part about Michilimackinac is the fact that everybody knows it as the fort that's there now, but that fort was not actually that fort. The entire fort was burned down, and it was rediscovered basically just off of like the little bit that was left of the fort. And then they tried to recreate it the best that they possibly could to rebuild it in that area. So it's like you also have that historic fort that also has that history of the entire fort being burned down. And I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't know exactly how the fort burned down, but of course they believe it was Native Americans. But of course that would be perfectly fitting if you were making military bases right across from their ancient burial grounds. So I mean, that would completely make sense with historical context.
It would, and yeah, that was the thing. The forts that were built out of timber, the Native Americans at some point usually burnt them down, and that one might have been burnt down in Pontiac's War, if I'm not mistaken. But this fort here, say this fort, I got a picture up here on top of the hill at Mackinac. This is an ancient stone fort. So this was never burnt. This was built in the 1700s, initially by the British. And as far as haunted places go, Shane, this is kind of it. This place is definitely haunted, and you can take a really cool haunted tours. If you the trick with the haunted tours are though, you have to stay the night because the tours don't start until I think they start at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and the last boat has already departed. So the only way you can take the haunted tour is to stay the night. But if you ever do stay the night, I highly recommend the haunted tours. Now, I'm going to move to some of the geological features because this is the most interesting part of Mackinac Island. Well, of course, the natives consider it to be a portal between worlds, but all the geological features will have a legend, and the legend will always have something to do with either star ancestors, a Native American being coming and going through the portal, giants, fairies. And in the case of Arch Rock, which is probably the most famous geological feature on the island, giant arch. The legend is, well, this was the portal that Gitche Manitou would come through when he came to the earth before going to his home, which we'll talk about in a minute, called Sugarloaf, which was his wigwam. But the basis of the story was Arch Rock was a portal between worlds. And there's another story of Arch Rock, and that's a different story in which there's a Native American maiden, and this is where she meets her star ancestor husband. And once again, Arch Rock was, legend has it, a portal between worlds. So 2 different arches were at Mackinac, though. Arch Rock, the legends have it that the giants, I'm sorry, I forgot this is a 3rd legend, the giants would also come through Arch Rock. And then there was a smaller arch called Fairy Arch. And Fairy Arch was where the legends had it the fairies came through. Now, Fairy Arch, unfortunately, is no longer there. They blew it up to extend the bike path.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me? For extending a bike path?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So now
What?
I don't want to say in their defense. I love biking around the island. But yes, it was destroyed. So you could get the bike.
You destroyed an ancient,
yes,
landmark for a bike path. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my fucking life.
Yep, you can see here how it kind of jetted out over the water and there was no way around it. So here's some lithographs before they destroyed it. But yeah, so there was a large arch for the giants, according to
when
legend.
When did they destroy it, by the way? Like 1800s, I assume, because that's back when they did dumb shit like that.
I think it was early 1900s. But yeah, it was a while ago.
That was the era of blowing up dumb shit and not actually thinking about what you were doing.
Absolutely, blew up everything. Yep, hell yeah, blew up everything, dug into everything. Yeah, for sure.
Fuck them fairies. You know what we need is a bike path.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
It's hilarious, though, the difference between Americans and Europeans, because ironically, they came from the same people. But in Europe, they're like, yeah, we have a ferry area, so we're going to literally reroute the highway about 100 miles out of the way so that we don't disturb the ferries. Over in Michigan, they're like, yeah, we need a bike path. Let's just blow this thing up. We've lost our fear of ferries now that we're in the new lands, and we're a little bit less afraid of the new lands now. So let's just say fuck it and blow this thing up now.
Yeah, obviously. So
should have kept that same old world custom, I guess. I don't get it, man.
I don't get it either. I do not get it. Yeah, as far as ferries go, though, I can't say there's actually any literal, not literal, but fairies like you're thinking, the beautiful winged fairies. But they do have, to this day, people see what they describe as fairy lights, which are basically blue orbs, basically blue plasma orbs, the way they're described. and they'll interact with people, and then they'll fly out and either disappear over the water or into the water sometime. And I've heard several different accounts of this exact same sighting scenario. So there are so-called fairy lights associated with the same area. It's actually the same area that the fairy arch used to be. Now,
Yeah, they're pissed because you blew up their home, man. Now they're trapped here forever.
That's most possible.
They're trying to bring you. Actually, maybe it's a good thing because the fairy lights are probably trying to bring you into the fairy realm and trap you, but they can't bring you back if they ain't got the portal no more. So I don't know. Maybe it was a positive thing. Too many kids were going missing, and they just didn't want to add that into the news reports at the time.
They might have some of the I don't have any in here. Some of the news reports from the time, in particular the 60s and 70s up here, were pretty crazy. We had there was like cops chasing around water creatures, like literally getting in their boats and going out after what they like, basically Loch Ness monster type creatures. Lots of UFO sightings coming out of the water. The cops chasing them around. Like, there's some crazy newspaper stories. All right, so I'm just going to shift it real quick from the fairies to go the opposite direction. This is Devil's Kitchen. And like I said, all these geological features have legends to do with otherworld beings. And Devil's Kitchen, the legend is this was the giants' realm. And the cannibalistic giants would cook their prey here. That's supposedly why you have all this charcoal like up in the back of the Devil's Kitchen. So now we have the legends of the fairies on one side of the island. This is on the other side of the island, Devil's Kitchen. We have the giants. And then directly in the center of the island,
just out of curiosity, not to again interrupt, but I want to bring it up with that little smokestack area. Does it just look like it's dark on the inside and that there's smoke char, or is there actually some form of like smoke char? Because the reason I'm asking, of course, is because it's on the other side of the country, but you have the whole thing about Lovelock Cave with the Native Americans and then pushing the giants into it, and then basically setting the cave on fire where they wouldn't be able to escape. So if there was instances of giants cooking people inside of these caves, it would almost be like just dessert that they ended up getting burned in their own cave. So I'm just curious if there's if it's simply just legend, or if there's weirdly like these connecting details where it makes it seem like, all right, maybe there is something weird about this legend.
I believe the blackness is smoke char. Like that's a real thing. And there's also another cave up farther above this you can't see in the pictures that connects to the legend too, where Native American maiden waited for her star ancestor above the cave of the giants. And long story short, the star ancestors ended up destroying the giants. So it is actually charred. How much of a seed of truth is in the legend, it's hard to say.
Still an interesting, weird detail, though.
Yeah, I find it interesting that pretty much every
because there's correlating other stories across Native American mythology.
Native American mythology around the island in general, like there's every feature has something to do with some type of otherworldly entity or star being, like every one of them. Sugarloaf in particular here. This is in the middle of the island, and it's basically a giant limestone pillar obelisk, so to speak. And this was believed to be the wigwam or the home of Gitche Manitou, the most sacred god to the Native Americans. He would, like I said, come through Arch Rock as a portal and climb up the side of the hill. There was what was called the giant staircase. He would go through Arch Rock, climb up the giant staircase, and come here to Sugarloaf, this limestone stack. And this was his home. This was the spot that was supposedly a connection to other realms. And to this day, Native Americans go here and they make their offerings to Gitche Manitou. And, just another, this is the center of the center, so to speak. This is Mackinac Island's the center of their world, and this is the center of that center. This is the most sacred spot on the island is Sugarloaf. And if you go there, anybody listening to this, please do not climb on Sugarloaf. Please do not climb on it. It's eroding from people trying to climb on it, and people get stuck climbing up it. All right, but something super interesting I want to point out about Sugarloaf and Arch Rock, Shane, because this will make sense to you. We have an arch and a pillar. Mm-hmm. All right, this is the same symbolism that we see at all the Stargate parks that we look at. Here's a picture of one in Denver. This is the Continuum Park. You'll have the ring and the rod. The male is the rod or the obelisk. The ring is the female. The yin, the yang, the male, the female. Balance. Balance creates the portal. Same scenario in St. Louis with the Gateway Arch. The arch itself is a arch. That's like the arch is the female, just like arch rock. And when you turn the gateway arch sideways, or you look at it from its side, it's actually looks like an obelisk. And Eero Saarinen, the artist, he actually created it this way on purpose. So it was an arch from the front, an obelisk from the side, creating the gateway arch, another portal.
Something weird to think about, by the way, with all of this like portal symbology. So usually when you see these obelisks and the arches, there's usually one arch and then two obelisks. So you're talking about this whole idea about balance within the occult. I find it extremely fascinating that there's always two of the male, one of the female, even though I know that like the male and the two sides of the male is supposed to be the left hand and the right hand, of course. But like I find it fascinating that there's always this concept about like duality. But technically, if you're thinking about it, there's 2 for 1 on that one.
Yeah, in some cases, but if you look at these last 3 examples I give you, the gateway arch, that's one male, one female.
But if you turn it the other way, isn't there almost a second one on the other side if you think about it? Because there's the 2 arches going up. So you could look at it one way and it's 1, and then the other side it's 2, and then you have the big one in the center.
Like that?
Yeah, like you have the big one, and then you look at it from the side, that's 1, and then you look at it from the other side, and then that's the second pillar.
Yeah, you could look at it like that. You can look at it like that for sure. Either way, let's see. Either way, we're going to have some male and some female symbolism, rods and rings. And I point in particular like to point the Detroit one out because it's the identical symbolism that we have in Mackinac. The circular gateway with the pillar of the obelisk, the male, the female, the yin, the yang. But on Mackinac Island, this is your ancient version. In Detroit, we say this may be unconscious, like it just happened. Same on Mackinac Island, but this is the ancient version, and I find it interesting. They thought this was a portal area thousands of years ago, and we look at Detroit, and I think it's a portal area today. And somehow, people never knowing of each other created this, these monuments, identical.
I'm kind of curious if there might be somewhat of like a mirror that happens through Michigan. Because hear me out on this concept. Yeah. So you're talking about Mackinac, and you're talking about, the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. Most people, of course, when they talk about Michigan, they end up using their hands as a map, and that's included for also using a hand for the Upper Peninsula. So if you're talking about Mackinac and you're looking at the whole concept of the 2 hands, you basically have 2 hands sitting like this, and then you have this little spot in the center. So it's like even within symbolism, I think that there might be something that's represented between basically there being these 2 hand symbols that are essentially leading into this point that's simulating like the whole male and female creation within, like a giant circle going inside with a giant obelisk. Like I feel like there's even more layers to this if you start kind of like looking at it even more expanded back.
100%. I can totally go along with that. And it seems to be whatever's happening. I don't know if you call it the thinning of the veil. What it seems to be happening more and more often, so to speak, and being recognized more and more. And I don't know exactly what to make of that, but it's continuing. It's like whatever's happening, it's in the process of happening, and new monuments will show up consistently. Like when me and you went for our walk, we've seen some of the old stuff, but we've seen how stuff is showing up like a year or two ago. It's still showing up, and which is the same at Mackinac. This is brand new. This just showed up when you're on the dock. You're about to leave. You'll have your classic portal sculpture. All these places, somehow a piece of artwork pops up.
The Golden Corridor in Sterling Heights that just got built like less than 10 years ago. Like that's still like recent too.
Exactly. So that's just what I'm showing. These places for some reason, and this was probably unconscious. I don't think that this guy who put this portal sculpture on the dock on Mackinac Island, I seriously doubt he was into this portal symbolism. I mean, I could be wrong, but for whatever reason, when we find these locations, the symbol of the portal continuously shows up. So you'll see that, Shayn, when you get it. That's when you get off the boat or when you leave the boat. That'll be the first or last thing you see is that sculpture right there.
I almost kind of find it interesting that, of course, looking into like some of this older stuff, like there's these natural formations that caused this symbolism to happen in the area. So I find it almost kind of fascinating that the new stuff is basically like recreating the old stuff, but in like a synthetic way. And I feel like that almost like represents something all in itself, is that like the land was naturally doing something, and now it's almost seems like it's either one can't do it anymore, so it's artificially trying to get us to do whatever it needs to be done, or two, there's something that's imbalanced and we're almost like trying to rebalance it by trying to like essentially like make up the difference. Like maybe there is some type of like thought and intention behind what they're doing, and a lot of these people are, you know, playing devil's advocate and pretending like they don't know what they're saying, but maybe they actually do know what they're doing and they are aware of what they're doing. Or maybe they could have even been influenced by somebody who knew what they were doing and they didn't even realize they were being influenced.
That's 100% possible too. It can go either way. Like I said, it's a mystery to me, but either way, it's impressive to me that continuously the same symbol shows up in the same scenario over and over again. And I mean, and we haven't even got out of Michigan. Like this, we're just talking Michigan. You know, we haven't even left. This is the same scenario around the Midwest and around the country. But I mean, we can prove our point by just the Great Lakes state of Michigan, which is pretty cool. So I'll buzz through the rest of Mackinac. You know, just some of the things they're known for: being a portal area. Captains report ghost ships. Like I mentioned, there's been sightings of water creatures up to the point where the police are out there in the lake looking for them. And some of these sightings, I won't totally get into this, but there's a campground right here off the tip of the mitten called Mackinac Mills Campground. And there's been a lot of these sightings taking place right from this campground, from some of the owners of the campground. In particular, this is Frank Rogala, and he's had incredible UFO sighting there when him and his brother were little, as well as water monster sightings there his father had. And
I love his glasses.
Oh yeah, and Frank is an awesome guy. Just briefly, since it's 2 weeks away, on August 31st through September 2nd, they're having a Disclosure in Mackinac conference. It'd be a super cool conference to go to if anybody, you know, has some extra time and wants to see Mackinac firsthand.
By the way, that wasn't a sarcastic comment. I didn't want that to make it sound like it was a sarcastic
comment. No,
they
are cool.
Like,
they are cool.
I think
glasses.
it's super duper cool when these guys that kind of like find like their niche as far as like having these events or something that happen. They find their like little like trademark, and it's just this like weird thing that they wear that like defines them and makes them look different from everybody else. Like some guys pull off the fedora, some guys wear the scarf or whatever. But I don't know. That's what I'm trying to throw it into. I wasn't trying to make that sound like an asshole or sarcastic comment. Like those glasses are pretty dope.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and Frank's an awesome guy. I would highly recommend it if you're in Michigan and you want to check it out. But, you know, wrapping up Mackinac, lots of USOs, literally UFOs coming out of the water. A lot of sightings.
I actually had somebody from Maine who particularly like covered this in particular, and they're talking about these underwater UFOs. So maybe there's a correlation. The other Mitten state has another anomalous thing happening with these constant like underwater UFOs. So just maybe something there. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing here is these underwater USOs, as well as these blue plasma orbs I talked about going in and out of the water. Like they've been a lot of sightings of that. So where I'll wrap it up with this is the window area, just like a lot of the other areas we talked about. But what I find intriguing about this one in particular is it's what I like to refer to as a gate on the strait. And certain areas, the Straits of Mackinac, the Straits of Detroit, and the Straits of, we didn't get into it today, but the Straits of Niagara Falls.
Maybe we can get into that one for next time.
Absolutely, man. And I think it has something to do with the straits, where the water, these great lakes with these enormous currents, where the water narrows, and in particular narrows, and then it wraps around an island, like Mackinac Island, like Belle Isle, like Goat Island and Niagara Falls. I have a feeling that the geology has some sort of effect on these window areas, these portal places. And when you really zoom in on the ancient legends of these areas, they're absolutely identical. You'll have the same legends and lore, the same, it's as if you're listening into the same legends. And I think it has something to do with these areas. I call them the gates on the straits. So we don't
Also, I mean, just to throw this in here too, how many people have one quote tried to go over the falls, so to speak, and have died in the process? And then correlating into Mackinac Bridge, how many people have ended their lives on Mackinac Bridge? Actually, weirdly enough, 2 days after I drove on the bridge going up recently, there was somebody that had jumped off the bridge. So like, I feel like there also might be a correlation with like the ritualistic aspect of, one, it being this middle place, and two, it also being this constant place of death, whether or not it intentionally draws it in or not.
Dude, great find, Shayn. Yeah, absolutely. Say Niagara Falls, you think about it. I got a slide on here right now. Mad scientists, honeymooners, daredevilists, suicidalists, oh my. People are drawn to these areas of life and death. You got the honeymooners who would go, Niagara Falls was the honeymoon capital of the world. They'd go there and they would think they were going to conceive a new life. This is where they wanted to bring it in a life into the world. And then you got the daredevils who are literally tempting fate, going over the falls. If they are to die, this is the spot they're going to have it happen. And then you got the suicidalists. It's also, not only is it the honeymoon capital of the world, but it's the suicide capital because of how many people will jump over the falls. So like you said, you have this draw to the past, present, and future, to this life and the afterlife. And that's a similarity at all of these window areas we talked about.
Just out of curiosity, Tesla, he had obviously some connections in with Niagara Falls, but did he have any connections in with the Mackinac area?
No, he had no connections that I'm aware of with the Mackinac area. Niagara Falls, though, was like, it was actually his boyhood dream to come to Niagara Falls and harness the energy of the falls. That was like his dream as a young man. So when you go to Niagara Falls, there's several sculptures of him. There's one on the Canadian side you're looking at here on the screen. There's one on Goat Island. There's a giant Teslatron in one of the hotels. So this was like an area that Tesla dreamt of to harness. He actually called this the power portal. This is right on his sculpture. He called Niagara Falls the power portal. And, we won't get into it, but Nikola Tesla, I believe he might have taken on the archetype of the Thunderbird or the Birdman. And he, some of his life correlates heavily to some of the legends that surround Niagara Falls. So yeah, Nikola Tesla, like, I think he recognized one of these places. He literally called it the power portal, and I'd be happy to call Mackinac Island and Detroit also power portals.
Just out of curiosity, too, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the way that the falls horseshoes, it ends up creating like a spiral or like a vortex underneath, right? So that also kind of plays in with this whole, like, it pulls you down into like this otherworldly like realm almost. So it's like as people are daredeviling off of it, they're not only going down the falls, but they're also like spiraling downward before they come back up again. So it's almost like this weird rebirth thing and connecting with the Phoenix. I mean, that's essentially the Phoenix story, but done in an aquatic way, rather.
100%. You got a good eye, Shayn. Yeah. So symbolically, people go over the falls, Horseshoe Falls, whichever falls. They go down and come up through a vortex. And then if they make that, they will float down the river at a high rate of speed underneath the Rainbow Bridge. This is the bridge connecting Canada to the U.S., but the Rainbow Bridge symbolically is a gateway between worlds. And as they float under the Rainbow Bridge, they'll be able to hear the rapid roar of what they call the vortex whirlpool. And the Niagara River takes a sharp right-hand turn, and when it does, it creates a giant vortex of water that would take you straight down to the bottom. And legend has it this was the realm of the underwater panther Mishipishu, and this was the entranceway to the underworld. So you nailed it, Shayn. You go over the bridge, through the vortex, under the Rainbow Bridge, then through the whirlpool vortex into the next realm.
You know what's
symbolically.
I mean, it's really really cool, but on the other side, man, once you kind of have this eye that you see this kind of stuff, like it becomes so hard to watch things because every single movie you watch,
Yeah,
every single thing, it's like you see like the multiple layers that were in things. So it's like every single time you watch a movie, it becomes just like layers of like, what did this person actually mean by this? Do they intend to actually put this in it? Like you start seeing stuff on like a totally different level, and you almost like can't turn it off sometimes.
absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, you can't turn it off. It's hard to turn it off, and it's funny when you try to explain it to somebody else who doesn't get it.
Yeah, and
But
it's just
like,
so blatantly obvious right in front of you. Like you're looking at this vortex into another giant vortex that they talk about brings you into the underworld, which
yeah,
symbolically and literally brings you into the underworld. And if you're
literally,
lucky enough to make it past that, then you're in the calm and smooth, which is essentially the whole idea about after, going all the way down to the underworld, you come back up and resurface as a hero, which is also another way of basically
yes,
representing like the hero's journey. Also
absolutely,
going into like another form of symbology that we're extending into past this. It's essentially like the hero's journey or like the warrior's journey.
100%. The hero's journey plays huge into all of this. It really does. But yeah, so that's pretty
Sorry,
much.
I thought you were switching to another slide. My bad.
No, no, you're good. So that's kind of, I'll show you see one more symbolic aspect of Niagara since I already got the slides pulled up. The symbolism just piles up, and when you go down and you want to take the journey behind the falls, the holes you view the falls from are literally called the portals. So you got signs everywhere saying here's the tunnel to the portals. Then you get
I've actually been through here as a kid, and I remember seeing these.
yeah,
And these things are so bizarre looking from the back. Like, it almost doesn't look like a place that tourists should be because you're
yeah,
literally looking at this decrepit looking hole that's wet as fuck that they won't let you get within 100 feet of. And it's just a mist of a wall of like thousands of pounds of water on the other side of it.
yep,
Like,
yep.
you walk into that, you're essentially just blasted down. Like, it's just, you're looking at it
Oh,
like
you're
a
done.
tourist thing, not realizing like how powerful of a force of water is coming down right in front of that little opening.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it's ironic to me. They describe all these openings as portals. You got the Cataract Portal, the Great Falls Portal, and the legend has it. The legend of the falls was that the Thunderbirds they had a cave under the falls, and that cave was the portal to the upper worlds. So now here we literally have portals, literally with signs saying they're portals, symbolically under the falls.
Just out of curiosity, I know that there's the whole like crossing the abyss when it comes to the occult, and they usually use green to represent that. I'm going on a blank right now. As far as these tunnels go, I'm sure using red lights is supposed to represent something. As far as your research, like, have you noticed that you believe that red is supposed to represent anything in particular? Because I'm assuming that it's supposed to set somebody into a certain frequency or mind state when they're like crossing through these tunnels.
Yeah, like you said, I assume the color of the light is intentional. I don't know exactly what state of mind it's supposed to put you in, but the fact that you could have, we both know how lights work and the different light spectrums, and you could have any color of light through, and the fact that they have these orangish red lights, they're oranger than a high pressure sodium light. They're like very purposefully orange. So I feel it's probably purposeful. I'm not sure, what the intent is.
Okay, I already got something for you here. You're talking about how people would go to the Niagara Falls in order to conceive life, and you're talking about this whole idea about rebirth and life.
Yeah,
Red in the occult, particularly red light, is supposed to be a direct link into physical vitality, raw desire, sacrifice, and life force. So it
bam.
literally mirrors exactly what we're talking about. Like, it was so plainly in front of us that we were looking right past it.
Yep, 100%. And
And
going,
it also represents the underworld and lower chakras.
so it makes all the sense in the world. You're below ground under the falls. Yep, that makes all the sense in the world, man. Good one.
Like I said, so obvious that we're already talking about it, not realizing it was right in front of us.
Yep, literally right in front of us. Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of the connection I make, between the gates on the straits, and this is all, and there are other ones too. I started looking after I kind of made these connections. I started looking at other straits around the world, and I think it's more than just the Great Lakes straits. Like I said, I think the geology likely has something to do with some of these window areas we're talking about.
And hopefully we can expand out from here even a bit more, man. I know that it's been a little while in between our two gaps of these shows. I know that as you were kind of mentioning, you use Starlink and everything where you're at, but I think you said you were switching to a different type of internet soon. But I know going into winter, fall months when the leaves aren't on the trees,
Yeah.
makes it even easier to get an internet connection for you and stuff. So
Yep.
moving into the winter and stuff, man, maybe we can try to reconnect a little bit sooner and we can start trying to cover some of these other areas because I know you kind of like quick breezed over Niagara Falls, but in particular, I would love to get even further in depth into Niagara
Yeah.
Falls. I'd love to dive into some of your Phoenix research with that, some of the stuff connecting in with Tesla. Maybe again, we can leave it as a little Easter egg for next time that we could dive into, and we can plan to set that one up sooner rather than later, man.
That sounds awesome. That sounds great, man. Yeah, soon as the leaves fall off the trees, I got a clear sight of view to Starlink, and I'm ready to rock.
Hey, we actually did pretty good today, surprisingly. Once we got rolling, there wasn't any issues. I know the first time we had a bunch of issues, but this time was actually surprisingly smooth. So I'm happy with that.
Yep, I'll take it.
So, man, I guess starting to wrap up towards the end, before we get into links and everything, and where people can, of course, find your books and all the different stuff that you've been working on, I always like to end the show with some words of wisdom, man. So, just like last time, if there was any words of wisdom you might want to bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
Words of wisdom. I think Shayn kind of proved some good words of wisdom tonight, and by just being out there with once your eyes are open to this, it's hard not to see it. And go out there with your eyes open, and you'll start viewing some of these places in a whole new light, and I think you'll appreciate that new light.
You know what's really, really funny about you mentioning that too is, so I'm sure that you're from up farther north, and when you come down to the city, you come into the city, and there's just like this dark, heavy, like ominous presence to it, where it's like it's really, really hard to explain and quite place. But you can even be in like a safe area, you can be in like a bad area. It doesn't matter where you are, but as soon as you enter the city, you feel this like
Dude.
dark, heavy, thick presence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really funny
Mm-hmm.
that people that are into the occult obviously pick that stuff up. But I've actually had multiple people, weirdly enough, one person this week that mentioned that they went on vacation, came back, and they're like, as soon as you get in Detroit, you just feel this like weird dark heaviness. And it's a person who's not even into like any kind of occult research. So it's just like, I find it fascinating that everybody that travels, everybody that goes all these different places, whether you're into the occult or not, you come into the Detroit area and everybody picks up on this energy shift or like this difference in energy. And you never hear that it's a positive one. It's usually this like chaotic, raw, uncomfortable energy, which is probably why so much gravitates towards it, because obviously where there's going to be chaos is where people are going to try to create order and control. So it's like if you can control that chaos in this place, it's almost like a different level of mastery, which is maybe why Crowley had the intention of even coming to Detroit and trying to build the Masonic Temple in the first place. But again, I find it fascinating that this idea, this concept is something that extends even further than just this research, but even just people who are just in the city. And even like the whole Nine Rouge thing, it's like that story is like almost forgotten as far as the city goes. But again, it just kind of continues on with this whole like dark cloud or dark ambiance over the city that this guy appears every single time something bad happens and essentially celebrates it.
Yeah, no, there's a 100% energy that you can feel when you're traveling from northern Michigan to southern Michigan. Say, I've been going back and forth all summer to my in-laws down to Sterling Heights, just north of you, and there is a feeling that switches it's about halfway, but it is two different feelings. And like you said, the closer you get to Detroit, the I don't want to say darker, but the heavier it feels, so to speak.
And ironically, you get the opposite when you cross the Mackinac Bridge. I don't know about you, but it's like as soon as you cross the Mackinac Bridge, it almost kind of feels like you're in like I don't want to say like a dreamscape, but almost like in like a wonderland or like it seems like more like whimsical or like it's like a totally different presence. And the whole aspect of that, when you think about the whole fact that there's like, the two hands that come together and there's this weird entry point in the middle. One side of it feels dark, the other side of it feels light and happy, and then there's this weird spot in the middle. It again is like this totally different presence. And again, any Michigander, everybody that travels will tell you like you go over the bridge and everything feels different. It feels happy, like you're in a good mood. Like it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're in the Upper Peninsula. But then as soon as you come down here, you come closer and closer to the Detroit area. It just gets thicker and thicker and heavier and just darker.
Yep. And that middle spot you're talking about, that's Mackinac Island. Like that's the middle spot right there. So I'm excited for you to go there.
That's exactly where it shifts too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's the spot, and that's been recognized for thousands of years that was that spot.
And ironically enough too, maybe it's just a perfect plot spot for placement, whatever. But anytime anybody is ever unalived on the bridge, it's usually somewhere near the center. So again, that's that like shifting point about when it goes from feeling like it's the dark presence to like the lighter presence between the two areas. So it's like, I feel like there's also something symbolic that more often than not, it happens in that particular spot, because realistically, it's like, you know, you could jump off almost anywhere on the bridge, but people continuously walk down to almost the complete center before something weird happens, you know?
Yep. Totally.
But I guess continuing on past that, man, if anybody wanted to continue to dive into your research, I know that you have a couple of books out there. I know that you go around doing different presentations and stuff, and I'm sure that you're always willing to hear people's different perspectives, and if they have any stories or anything like that to throw in to possibly even connect or help out your research. So if anybody wanted to connect with you, find any of your information, anything like that, where can people find all your work across the internet, and where can they get up with you, man?
Yeah, thank you, Shayn. We'll start with just connecting with me. My email is chad@chadstuemke.com. Stuemke. And feel free to shoot me a message, you know, and I'm happy to talk about anything. I have a website, also chadstuemke.com, and I do have a book there right now. I'm doing an update to that book, to the Stargate Detroit book, and I'm going to be putting out a book on Mackinac in the next, hopefully, 6 months or so, if all goes well. As far as seeing me, I'm going to be doing a conference at the end of September in Houghton Lake, the Michigan UFO Con. And I'll be speaking. I'm not sure if I'm speaking on Friday or Saturday yet, but I will be speaking there if anyone's interested in coming up. And they'll be doing a sky watch and everything. We're staying at a hotel in Houghton Lake. And yeah, that's about it. Like I said, feel free to get a hold of me. I love chatting with anybody. Any questions or anything you just want to share, feel free.
Well, man, as per usual, I appreciate you making the time, coming on and sharing all of this fascinating research. And honestly, man, it's like I love diving into your stuff because particularly it's in my own backyard. And hopefully that will inspire others to, as you always say when you come on the show, man, to inspire others to start diving into their own backyards, because, you know, a lot of this stuff mirrors into other places. So just because we're talking about Michigan doesn't mean that you can't use this information to start looking around in your own backyard or your own neighborhood and possibly be the first to really start to map and discover all this stuff and put it all together and kind of put into the group effort of essentially discovering this stuff across the grid. Essentially, like, just because you're doing it in Michigan in this area doesn't mean that somebody can't start doing it in their own home area and connecting in the research with yours.
No, that's the whole point of it, man. If I can inspire one other person to do one other city, I'm a happy camper, man. But that's what it's about, is not trying to own this research. I'm trying to share this research, and it's easy to do. Like look at you, man. Once you see it, you almost can't unsee it. It's easy to do, to go out and see what's in your own neighborhood. You'll probably be surprised. I've seen crazy stuff in small little towns. Like, you know, in the town I live in, and I got a giant rainbow trout. But long story short, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Oh, yeah, and we'll definitely have to make sure we dive into it next time, man. As I said, man, it's always an absolute pleasure, and I'm really, really looking forward to next time we get to dive into this stuff. I'm curious whether your research continues to go, and I'll definitely have to make sure I scoop your book for Mackinac when it comes out.
Absolutely, man. And thanks again, Shayn. I really appreciate it, bud.